think Tipu Sultan is a historian's enigma. Freedom fighter and so on, I don't subscribe to that. He sends an emissary all the way to the Caliph, the Ottoman Caliph, and says, I am the true Muslim ruler. I have killed so many kafirs, I have burnt so many things, temples and churches, so you call me the Badshah of Mysore. And there was Hector Munro, who was the hero of Buxar and Plassey wars, who had defeated the Mughal emperor, the Nawab of Awadh, the Nawab of Bengal. He literally throws his weapons into a water tank in Kanchipuram and runs away to save his life. So that was the kind of terror that Hyder and his son in those first two wars brought on the British.
What are some of the first steps he takes to show the fact that he's in fact a deeply radical Islamic ruler?
We had the Mandya Mayangars in Mysore. 700 of them, men, women and children, were ruthlessly slaughtered on the day of Naraka Chaturdashi before Diwali. Even to this day, while all of us celebrate Diwali, that group does not celebrate Diwali. He started his own calendar system called the Maududi calendar. Many people talk about this too, that fine irrigation works, palaces, forts which the Wadiyar rulers had built over centuries, they would all be demolished and in its place you build another just to stamp your authority over it. He was a very, very vivid dreamer. It is said that every day he would wake up and actually spend about 2 hours in his toilet. He would sit and write these dreams down which he saw the previous night. In fact, I got some of those dreams even psychoanalyzed. Those dreams are...
Thank you, Vikram, once again for being on Dostcast.
Thank you, Vinamre. Such a pleasure to be back within 6 months.
Within 6 months, the last time we met in Faridabad and we spoke about Waiting for Shiva,
yes,
your last book, and we spoke about your work for preserving archival Indian music.
Yeah.
We will talk about it at the end. Right now, we're talking about Tipu Sultan. You've written, a book that is as good as a murder object, as a historical book to parse through, and hopefully it becomes a reference books in many libraries and whatnot. A few important questions to set context before we dive into Tipu Sultan's life.
Right.
I will start with my rudimentary understanding of him as memory serves. You think about Tipu Sultan in India, you think about freedom fighter, Indian freedom movement, good guy, one of the many people remembered. That's it. You forget there. You stop there.
Yeah.
Then you have, in the preface of the book, you've got Shashi Tharoor, right? Who writes this: it may well be impossible to resolve the contradiction between the visionary Indian resistance hero to British conquest and the widely reviled murderer of thousands of Hindus and Christians. But Vikram gamely tries. But one feels that Vikram is holding an 18th century warrior to 21st century standards, right? So I assume that Shashi is towing the Congress line where they have tried in the past in Karnataka to maybe champion him as a hero, right? Let's start there. Why this contradictory, confusing statement about Tipu Sultan?
Well, I don't think Dr. Tharoor came from that standpoint because he's a thorough gentleman and a great scholar, and he actually went through the entire book to give his endorsement of it. That contradiction about where to bucket Tipu Sultan into which bracket, I think it exists not only with the Congress or with Dr. Tharoor or anybody else, but a lot of Indians, because as he mentions, as I always mention, I think Tipu Sultan is a historian's enigma. For everything that you say about him, there's an equal and opposite, anecdote that you can come up with. My whole grouse with a lot of people who call him, as you also said, freedom fighter and so on. I don't subscribe to that view at all. He was a very brave soldier and extremely anti-British, of which there can be no doubt. To actually deny him that bravery or that, almost visceral hatred that he had for the British, I think that would be very disingenuous with history. So to that extent, I do concede that. But what other adjectives and qualifiers can we put to him thereafter is something that we need to, look into.
I think then we arrive at a difficult territory because there is a whole discussion in pop culture where people talk about, has this aged well, right? Where you often have people, historians like yourself, or even in pop culture, like they will analyze a song from the 50s, which many people think is perhaps sexist in today's terms, is often a reflection of those times, right? So when what Dr. Tharoor is saying is you can't hold this 18th century warrior to 21st century standards.
No, that is true, because I qualify that too, that with kingship, there is inherent violence. And we're talking of a pre-modern era when the Hindu rulers were also violent in wars like it even now. I mean, you have the war in the Middle East, you have what's going on in Russia, Ukraine. Common civilians become collateral damage in any war. That is no doubt. And, pre-modern kingship was intrinsically linked with violence, particularly against citizens. That is a given. But I think problem with people like Tipu Sultan is when there is an added element of religious targeting. You target a particular community or group of people specifically on the basis of their religious identity, then that's a double whammy. In addition to the normal violence that war entails, you're also targeting them on the basis of religion. And in fact, the United Nations definition of genocide is just that. Your intent to target is defined as genocide, where you're specifically looking out for people who have a certain identity. It could be religious, it could be linguistic, it could be racial. And so to that extent, Tipu Sultan becomes the problem there, because in addition to regular violence of war, he specifically targeted people who didn't subscribe to his faith, in this case Hindus and even Christians in southern India.
We will talk about his dichotomy, because you also mentioned in the book that there are grants that he gives to temples. He often has priests doing japas and mantras for him. He's a very superstitious man, right?
Yeah.
But before that, to set context for modern day Karnataka's culture, modern day politics, you earlier mentioned in the book that India in general has a Delhi-centric history problem, right? So, as a son of Karnataka soil, what made you pursue writing this book? And then why is this person relevant for people from Karnataka, contemporary South India and the rest of the country?
That'll be a long answer.
That's fine. We're on a podcast.
That's the advantage. In television, they would have told me to stop midway. So why I wrote this book has been in the making. It's been germinating in my head for close to 10-15 years now. In fact, I owe my entire foray into writing to Tipu Sultan in a very, unintended way, because there was a sword of Tipu Sultan. I think you were too young. You were not even born then.
It just got auctioned in the UK for 3.4 crores.
No, not the sword. I'm talking of the serial, which used to come on Doordarshan those days. I'm sure you were not born then to see.
Yeah.
I'm underscoring how old I am compared to you. So there was Sanjay Khan's The Sword of Tipu Sultan on Doordarshan, and all over, those who saw, they'd remember among your viewers that there to highlight Hyder Ali, Tipu's father, and Tipu. Hyder had usurped the throne from the Maharajas of Mysore, the Wadiyars, and to show them, Hyder and Tipu, in a good light, the Wadiyars were shown in an extremely derogatory fashion in that serial. The Maharaja was shown like this, obese retard who's dancing with the court dancer. The Maharani, one of those typical vamps, always conspiring and conniving against Tipu. And he was almost shown like this, hyper secular, monarch who's having Upanishads being read in his court. He's treating everyone with a lot of care and concern. And even then, it had caused a lot of furor. Several Malayali associations had written to the then INB minister, Congress Minister Upendra, I think, who asking him to reconsider. Sitaram Goyalji had written an entire book, Tipu Sultan, was he a hero or villain, where he had documented these details. And in Karnataka, so there was also this studio where he was shooting had caught fire, and Sanjay Khan's face had got burnt. And a lot of Kannada media here was saying, it's a curse of the Wadiyar for the kind of bad portrayal he had shown. So I was then, I think, a boy of just 12 or 13 years of age, studying in middle school, and somehow these protests, these talk of this curse and all, something it did to me. I wanted to know the truth behind the false portrayal only of that one Maharaja and Maharani. And from then on began several unending trips to Mysore. And it was really destiny's call, because my family had nothing to do with Mysore per se. So kept going there, meeting members of the royal family, historians, archivists, and collecting everything and putting it together in the the form of a logbook of sorts.
As a boy of 12.
As a boy of 12. Yeah. And it became a family project, in fact, for my parents, for my maternal grandmother. We all kept going. I tortured them too. I couldn't read Kannada those days. I learnt it much later.
What was the intent? It was to document Tipu's life specifically?
Not
or was
Tipu's
it to...
life. Only that Maharaja and Maharani I was interested in. Immadi Krishnaraja Wadiyar and his wife, the very sagacious Rani of Mysore called Maharani Lakshmi Ammanni. So it was just their lives I wanted to document in a personal logbook of sorts. I could paint and sketch those days. So I would also sit in the palace and make portraits of the Maharajas and all of that. And it was completely for personal, the joy of discovery, the joy of just going on a self-motivated, also self-funded project, which was what was very, it was an intellectual high for me. It was never with the intention that one day this is going to become a book or I'm going to become a historian or anything. And that madness actually continued for 10 long years, even while I was in the midst of my board exams, my engineering entrance and all of that. And even after I got into my corporate job, there was a Mysore bug had bit me. And from just that one king and queen, the interest then graduated to the entire family. And they were one of India's longest ruling royal houses. They ruled for 600 years, from 1399 till the time India got freedom in 1947. And I was quite alarmed to know that there was not a single book written in the modern times on the entire span of their rule, covering their political, the social, economic, cultural history of Mysore, which is also in a way a history of the making of modern Karnataka, because particularly the later Wadiyars, it is on their hard work, their kind of sacrifice that Karnataka, especially southern Karnataka or Bangalore, has the strong social, economic, engine that it became, and also the cultural osmosis that they brought in. So this was a book that was, I think, waiting to be written, and I was just chosen to do that. And that's how, by chance, serendipity, 2008, my first book came out, Splendors of Royal Mysore, The Untold Story of the Wadiyars. Now, in that, obviously, 40 years was the usurpation period. And the subtitle of this book is also called Interregnum, which means exactly that, an interval or an intermission where a regular government is overthrown and a usurpation occurs. So 40 years is all that father and son, Hyder and Tipu, ruled. And that also becomes one of the most important epochs in Indian history, because Mysore was the last bastion of resistance to British colonialism. And it took the British 40 years and 4 Anglo-Mysore wars to actually subjugate this province, which also speaks something about the resistance that was offered. And I think that period has a lot of lessons for us today in India, because, as I said, after that we became steadily our decline to a slave country was propelled. So I was very keen to zoom in on those 40 years. And since then itself, I wanted to write a book on Tipu Sultan. But, lots of things happened in Bangalore. I think when the book came out, I was 26 or 27 years old. Didn't know the landmines and the sharks that are there in the world of Indian history writing. There was a lecture quite close to where we are sitting today here in Indiranagar in Bangalore, where I was giving a talk on the Interregnum period, and I was just reading out certain letters written by Tipu himself. He's telling his commander, go to Calicut, go to Malabar, this region, kill so many people, and also gloating to some of them, saying, I have converted 4 lakh infidels or kafirs to Islam. I was just reading these out, not even making my interpretation, and suddenly a civilized audience that was gathered in that room got up in protest, some of them, and there were paper rockets that were thrown at the podium, and I was quickly ushered backstage. The talk had to be aborted. I was taken away to safety, but my poor father was sitting in the first row, and somebody, I think there was some Tipu fan club or whatever that is, went and thrust a pamphlet in his hand and also told him that you have an only son, and if you want him to live long, ask him to mind what he speaks. And so obviously that led to, we don't come from a political family. We don't have political ambitions even today. Normal middle class people trying to make our living. So to get these kind of, unintended threats was quite something. And incidentally, just 2-3 weeks later, I think I'd written some article on the Diwans of Mysore, in which it had started with Purnaya, who was also Tipu's Diwan. And in that there were some references to Tipu Sultan, and that again created a furor. And right here in Bangalore, in the heart of the city, in MG Road, these protesters had gathered in front of the newspaper office, which had carried that article. And the editor hurriedly called me saying there are lots of protests and they're asking for your apology. I said, no, over my dead body, I'm not going to give an apology to anybody because what I've written is based on facts. If they have a problem with it, let them come out with a counter article. And the editor was willing to do that. She said, whatever space has been given to Vikram to write that article, I'll give you 2 times the space, more word limit. You write a detailed rebuttal. I think an intellectual counter to a book or an article is another book or another article, not street side protests and so on. But obviously, they were not the kinds who were going to write.
Yeah. And people say print doesn't have power. Like
those days, it still had. Today, it doesn't. the article, the print media. I mean,
but let me interject.
But and then they actually burnt my effigy right in the heart of the city. And the editor had actually called me, and she'd even sent me a picture of that burning effigy of mine. It was a badly made effigy, to be honest. So and I'd actually made that burning effigy my Orkut profile picture. There was those days only Orkut.
No, I remember Orkut, of course, before you talk about our gap.
Yes. But obviously that incident where my father, faced and what this effigy burning caused, my mother, who didn't keep too great health, I think she was extremely hassled, and she extracted a promise from me that I will never talk about Tipu Sultan in public after that. And I actually lived up to her promise. I didn't, speak about him, write about him thereafter, because unintendedly it was causing so much of heartburn at home. Unfortunately, we lost her in 2018. And after that, I thought the promise you've made to a person, if the person himself or herself is not there, the promise is also infructuous. So I broke the promise and decided to write this mammoth book, 15 years of Dil Ki Bhadas. All of it has come out in this. And you asked, why is it relevant or why is it important? It is important because he becomes such a polarizing figure in India and Indian politics even to this day. The Congress, the BJP, both playing their own set of politics for and against him. We are in a state where, 10 years ago, you had Tipu Jayanti, the birth anniversary of Tipu Sultan, celebrated on 10th of November every year. And under what conditions? Section 144 has to be imposed, where more than 4 people cannot gather, 2 people getting killed in police firing in Madikeri, in Coorg. Various communities, who still have that intergenerational trauma and memory of what he did to their ancestors, coming out in protest, including the Christians in Mangalore. All of that happening on one side, and then the BJP obviously seizes the chance to counter them. And in the run-up to the 2023 state elections, they came up with their own set of, absurd fiction, where they said, there were 2 Gauda chieftains called Uri Gauda and Nanje Gauda, who were the ones who killed Tipu and not the British. And this was done to get the Vokaliga vote in the elections.
Which is a dominant community in
South Karnataka, in that belt. Now they have an alliance with the JDS. So JDS brings the Gauda, vote in South Karnataka. And old Mysore region has been the place where the BJP has been traditionally not so strong. So to get that vote, you create a myth. There's not a single reference of these Gauda brothers anywhere in history books. Neither British historians nor Mysore's own historians have ever talked about him. So imagine a political party just creates this absurd myth, and it was left to the the Vokaliga Swamiji or somebody from the Mutt to ask the BJP to stop this and not use their community for their petty politics. And that's when that issue died its natural death. Otherwise, till then, in the media, in print media, in electronic media, every day people were discussing about Uri Gauda and Nanje Gauda, 2 people who didn't exist. So I think in the midst of all of this, where you have a 18th century monarch who becomes the topic of such strong contestations, electoral, fights between people, and political parties are milking this issue, to their advantage by creating stories or creating this highly polarizing environment of celebrating him and all that. I thought then that as a historian, it's my burden, it's my responsibility to bring the facts to the table. A historian's role is to just illuminate the archives. A common person need not have the kind of patience or the interest or the skills to go and ferret those details out. So we are postmen who will bring these things out of the archives and lay it bare for the discerning reader to make up his or her mind. After reading these 900 pages, if someone still thinks Tipu was a freedom fighter, a patriot, so be it. If someone gets reassured that he indeed was a zealot and a bigot, then so be it too.
Wow. First of all, I must say it is dangerous to be a historian, especially when I had no idea. Like, I think you don't mention this exactly, that the leading up to this book is a journey with personal skin in the game and tragedy
Yeah.
and loss, because your mother, since she forbade you to do this, I can't imagine what you must have felt all these years. Especially, like, I can't imagine sitting in a room and just delivering a lecture and having people get riled up for someone who's been dead for so long.
Yeah.
It shows you that a lot of my viewers, a lot of people from India, are so unaware about the political undercurrents that historical figures bring. In Maharashtra, you've got Shivaji.
Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj.
Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, of course, before I get hate, right? I did not know that Tipu Sultan is such a polarizing figure. But I'm just wondering, so if there is this BJP narrative which says that, supposedly these two fictional figures defeated Tipu Sultan, thereby establishing that it was actually, one community or one religion over the other, what is the other side? What do the Tipu apologists roughly look like? What do they stand for?
So I don't know if you go around Bangalore, even now, I'm sure the weaponization of Tipu is complete. In several areas, you would see, his photograph, along as icons along with Mother Teresa, Dr. Ambedkar. So he's almost in that same league. There are, you see auto rickshaws on the back of that. You have photographs of him. You have that, portrait of him fighting a tiger. And as I said, since the time of this Tipu Jayanti, I think he started, of course, now it's no longer in vogue, at least by the government of Karnataka. So individuals doing it is perfectly, their choice. Nobody can stop anyone in a free country. But for the government to use taxpayers' money to be doing this, at least that thankfully has stopped. Yeah. So he's invoked time and again. There was so much of controversy when the new Bangalore airport came up. There were people, including literateurs like Girish Karnad, who were batting for naming that airport after Tipu because he was born there in Devanhalli, a little away from the airport. Yeah. So, and of course, he said, let's not name him after Kempe Gowda. Now again, Gowda vote. So even the Congress disowned Girish Karnad. After that, he had to apologize. Yeah. The common citizens of Bangalore, like all of us, you know how far the airport is from anywhere.
Yeah, it's not a part of the city at all.
It's almost close to Hyderabad. A lot of us would want a multimodal, fast, rapid transport system to the airport. We care two hoots whether it is named after Tipu or someone else. But this is what, governments, political parties, sadly some so-called intellectuals also want to, distract attention from the real issues that matter. Bangaloreans want a high-speed metro to go right into the heart of the airport like it is in Delhi or even in the Heathrow airport. It takes me 2 hours to get to the airport from my house.
Or they should construct a Ulsur channel like the English channel.
Yeah. And for the hypocrisy, Vinamre, is that the Devanhalli place where Tipu was born, if you actually go there, it's in a mess. There is hardly any anything made up there. There's no one to guide you through. It's just a broken part of some old fort, and there's nothing to commemorate that. So all these so-called politicians who spend crores of taxpayers' money on this Jayanti and other things, if they'd spent that much to actually preserve some of the monuments associated with him, or when you go to Srirangapatna, which was his capital, the last day of Tipu, a kind of a walkthrough, an audio guide walkthrough saying this was where the British entered, this was where the breach in the fort was effected, this was where he died. That would be so much more educative and also important. If you really want to perpetuate his memory and legacy, I think that is more important things to do. And that is the tragedy and the irony. We as a nation don't care too much about our history, don't care too much about preserving monuments, artifacts, anything of the past. But we make sacred cows, pun intended, on all these people of the past. You can't write a objective biography of Chhatrapati Shivaji or Dr. Ambedkar or E.V. Ramaswamy, otherwise called Periyar, and people like this, because, there'll be a hate mob ready to lynch you down. So so let's see. I hope my breaking my promise to my mother, she's there in some heaven protecting me from any problem that might, I hope, doesn't arise. Because for every claim I make, I think 150 pages of the book are endnotes and bibliography. So for every claim I make, there's a source that I have citations for. So
talking about mobs, so before I even read the book, I was just trying to understand what is the context of this Tipu Jayanti particularly, right? For me, as someone coming from the north, I heard it for the first time.
Yeah.
So in 2015, a VHP leader died during the Tipu Jayanti in Kodagu, and then in Shivamoga. Am I saying that right?
Yes, Shivamoga.
Shivamoga. In a procession in October 2023, 4 people were injured. A few hours later, when the mob was dispersed, a Muslim youth heightened tensions by using his blood to inscribe the words "Sher Tipu."
Yeah.
Right. To me, it seems like why is he like? I don't understand. Ki khoon wagera use kar lena. How did it get so bad, and why is it not covered more often? I've seen similar skirmishes. For example, in the north, there is a Raja called Raja Mihir Bhoj. So Gujars and Rajputs, for a brief while, last year were fighting tooth and nail to establish whose Raja was it really. And they made you Instagram videos, cursed each other, abused each other to establish historical supremacy. It would not change anything.
Yeah.
But it was simply, many people got injured.
Yeah.
It was ugly.
Yeah.
Right.
That's the irony. I mean, as I said, his fort here is crumbling. His armories, where he used to have this ammunition and all made, many of them have been destroyed in Srirangapatna just because he wanted to lay a railway line or something like that. So preserving objects and elements associated with a character and actually having some research work done on him or her. I think that is a better way of commemorating someone than actually taking people's lives in today's context.
Right.
But yes, as I said, the weaponization of history and historical figures, it's not limited only to Tipu Sultan. There are so many others. Yeah. And that is where I think genuine historians and scholars need to come in because the onus is on us to set the record straight. Yeah. And I think truth is the best disinfectant. So, once information is laid out, you can make your mind either way. I don't even want to, I've never in all my books, never tried to prejudge or sit in judgment for the reader. That is infantilizing the reader. Let them make their mind after reading the facts which speak for themselves.
Yeah, because I don't think a book that big can be polarizing. You really have to parse through all kinds of complexity and nuances.
Yes. And that's what makes him interesting. He's as I said, he's an enigma. And I always, in my previous books on Savarkar, etc., I would love to see history not just as a dry catalogue of facts from birth to death of a person. People, human beings are complex. They are as complex as we are. And there are certain universal emotions, love, hatred, envy, jealousy. An 18th century ruler would have the same emotions as you and I today have. 18th century jealousy, hatred is not different from what it is today. Yeah. So looking at the arch of a person's life through also what were the experiences of that person's life which led him to do what he did. Or at least make a intelligent guess or estimate of that, almost psychoanalyzing the person. That's what I've always tried to do. The complexity of human mind and actions really interests me more than the dry cataloguing of facts. So even here, I've kind of tried to get under the skin and the mind of both Hyder and Tipu, who are very fascinating characters. Read them for what they bring to the table as complex human beings, and they're as complex as you, me, or anyone else.
Talking about psychoanalysis, you mentioned in the book that his father, Hyder, had a horrific childhood where at some point he was even, I'm assuming, burned or tried to, like he was contained in a steamed cauldron of some sort?
No, in a kettle drum, a nagada and beaten on a huge...
So he emerged from a severe traumatic childhood to usurp the throne from the Wadiyars. Let's go here. Let's go to Hyder's history. First, this particular incident to drive home the kind of generational trauma he will then inflict on his son, perhaps. But then the usurpation. I can't say the word for some reason.
Yeah. So Hyder's father, his ancestors were supposedly from the north, some say from Punjab, that part of the subcontinent, and then they settled down in northern Karnataka, which is where his father, Fateh Muhammad, he gets into the service of the Nawab of Sira. And when in 1721 is when Hyder is...
Historically, Sira is what today?
It is Sira only.
Sira, okay.
Yeah. So in Karnataka it is. So and his in 1721 is when Hyder is born, and quite eerily the astrologers actually predict that this boy is going to bring the death of his father, and so a lot of his relatives advise him to get the baby killed by giving it poisoned milk, but Fateh Muhammad refuses to do that. He lets the child live. But in a perverse, manifestation of the same prediction, when Hyder is 4 years old is when his father dies in battle. And there is he owed a lot of money to somebody else called Abbas Quli Khan. And to get that money back, Abbas Quli Khan sends his armies, they raid Fateh Muhammad's house, take away all that is there. And these two boys, Hyder is 4 years old then, and his elder brother Shahbaz is about 8 years old. And both these boys are then put into this big kettle drum and beaten upon till the time, they're almost exhausted and faint there to get as much money from the family. And at that very, very difficult situation was when his mother, Majida Begum, she runs away from the place and makes her trip all the way to Srirangapatna to meet the Maharaja of Mysore and plead with him for mercy for her fatherless sons. And the Maharaja then takes pity on the boys and pays off the debtor, and also assures the family that he will take care of these two boys. And when they come of age, they will be employed in the Mysorean service. And he lives up to the promise. Both brothers get, a position of a junior rank officer in the Mysore army.
Little did he know.
Little did he know. So Hyder makes his first, entry into the Mysore political firmament in 1749 in what is called the Siege of Devanahalli, again near the airport today. And from then, it took 12 years. In just 12 years, this man manages to have such a dream run of machinations and conspiracies and all of that, running with the hare, hunting with the hounds. He'll probably put all our modern politicians to shame in the kind of wiliness that he had, and manages to overthrow the same benefactor who actually saved his life. And in 1761 is when the usurpation happens, where the Wadiyar is deposed.
What's the exact details of the usurpation? Does he slowly gain military power till he one day seizes the throne?
So it's a long journey where that time, that's why a substantial early part of the book I also devote to the politics of the time. The southern India is in a huge political chaos at that time. You had wars of succession to the Nizam's throne in Hyderabad, to the Arcot Nawab, in Tamil Nadu. And the British and the French also get into these wars. You had the Carnatic wars which raged. Then you had Dupleix, Robert Clive, all of them playing their role there. And Mysore also becomes obviously a participant to this. But by then, the Mysore firmament had become so weak. The Wadiyar ruler who was there, Krishnaraj Wadiyar II, he'd literally let power, pass off into the hands of his commanders called Dalavais, Devrajayya and Nanjarajayya, the two brothers. And they had literally emasculated the king and the throne, and corruption, embezzlement of funds, all that was at an all-time high. And in the course of this war that happens, Carnatic war, there's a siege of Tiruchirappalli, and to get Trichy, which is today Trichy, Tiruchirappalli, Mysore, under Nanjaraj, it's involved in this really, reckless campaign which really drains off its treasury completely. Everybody loses in this war. Mysore's treasury is really exhausted. Nanjarajaya loses all his credibility. The only person who makes the maximum hay while the sun shone was Hyder. He loots the armies. He creates his own little standing army. He comes into contact with the French. He uses the French to build his little army that he have. And slowly he catches the attention of the Maharaja, who is quite impressed by his valor in the war. And so step by step, he's rising the ladder of political success in Mysore. He gets Dindigal as a Faujdar. So his axis of influence slowly starts expanding. And in a manner that these people, Nanjaraj especially was his political mentor. But once Nanjaraj fell, out of the favor of the Maharaja, even Nanjaraj is quite astonished to see Hyder just drops him like a hot potato without even bothering to stand by his mentor. So wherever the end is all mattered, the means was not something important. But that time the Mysore court also was full of conspiracies, full of political flux. Nanjaraj, who was the Dalwai, he's also the king's son-in-law. His daughter is married to the king, and despite that, he tries to go and assassinate the Maharaja right in the middle of the court. There's a Bollywood drama. His own daughter, who's the wife of the king, comes and stands, in protection of her husband, saying, "Meri lash pe guzar ke you have to go and kill my husband." So all this drama is happening there, and in the midst of all this Machiavellian man manages to find the best opportunities for himself, and he succeeds. So I think in terms of leadership skills, in terms of diplomacy, statecraft, and how you need to maneuver your way to your advantage when everything around you is in a flux, I think Hyder's story gives us that insight. And towards the end, when his power starts improving quite a bit, then it is then that the royal family realizes that, oh my God, we were actually trusting this man and he's becoming too big for his boots. And at very late in life, they try to effect a palace coup against Hyder through one of Hyder's own accomplices called Khande Rao. So he and the Queen Mother, they conspire, they try all this, but that also fails because right then is the 1761 Third Battle of Panipat. And the Marathas who had been called in to help the royal family to expel Hyder, they are unable to come on time. And so again, Destiny's Child, he was Destiny's Child where right things happen at the right time. And he manages to come back, and there's an open court where the king literally, he tells the Maharaja very clearly, I'm happy to go away from this place provided you clear all my dues. And the dues ran to almost the revenue of the kingdom.
And the treasury is
everything
starved.
is almost empty. And so he says, in lieu of that, then I will become the dictator, the Sarvadhikari, the dictator of the kingdom, and you be the puppet ruler. You will be given some kind of money for your upkeep. But
like a proto-princely purse.
Correct, yeah. Exactly. And the royal family, had no other option. The king was signing his own, obituary, but he had only himself to blame for that. And then they also request him that, Khande Rao, who was your man, who now helped us in this operation, please treat him, mercifully. And Hyder says, oh, don't be worried about that. I will treat him as endearingly as I treat my parrot. So they are assured that, okay, he's going to take very good care of him. Little did they realize that he actually kept his word literally.
Yeah.
Like a parrot, Khande Rao was put in an iron cage and fed only milk and rice for the rest of his life. And in the heart of Bangalore, in one of the bazaars, was when he was a public spectacle. People could come and see and mock him. And he died inside that cage.
And he would defecate there only?
Everything. Yeah, everything. And he died there. And even several decades later, people said in the Bangalore bazaars, we had this huge iron cage in which there were bones. And even his body was not even given a funeral. So when he said, I will treat him as endearingly as my parrot, little did anyone realize that he was going to take it so literally.
Man, I think modern politics has become so boring where, of course, we're in a...
Exactly, that's what I said.
We're in such a civilized world, but you're in a time when you get to enact like the most absurd public theater for your own joy and also to send a message to your enemies.
Yeah.
What I'm wondering is, what was the king's name? Sorry, the Wadiyar.
Krishnaraj Wadiyar.
Krishnaraj Wadiyar. It also shows you when the administrator is weak and blinded or unaware, there are so many traitors and usurpers hiding in the shadows waiting for their turn. Yes. It's also such a good example for modern day rulers and administrators to have a firm grip on their kingdom, their treasury and any usurpers, and to cut down anyone who is too ambitious.
Correct.
Right? Because so then let's just jump further in. At what point are the Wadiyars reinstalled? I know I'm jumping right ahead, but I sort of want to understand at what point do they figure out, we can still regain power?
No, they never gave up because, so he deposed the king, but Hyder had a sense of realpolitik. He knew that the people of the Mysore kingdom, a Hindu majority kingdom, had a lot of love and regard for this Hindu monarch who has come down from, 300 years, 400 years by then. And so to completely depose him was something that he did not want to or could not afford to do. So what he did instead was something which served him the best. He kept the Wadiyar as a figurehead ruler. So trophies of war would be gone and submitted to his feet. Farmans would come out in his name. Everything. I am the obedient servant of the Maharaja. But everybody knew where the real power lay. And he too, once this Krishnaraj Wadiyar dies, one of his children is put on the throne. He was okay to tolerate the new king till the time that person came of age when he could have his own children, or if he had a mind of his own, he was trying to assert himself or try to, contact enemies to get rid of him. immediately, without a whiff of delay, suddenly, a glass of milk would go to the king's chambers in the night, and the next morning you realize that the king is dead. It was poisoned milk sent, and it came from Hyder. So, and then there would be a charade of installing a new puppet on the throne. So you keep that as a figurehead. By the time they become teenagers or they can have children of their own, that person is terminated. So so it is that kind of Game of Thrones which he played. But and the royal family was kept under strict surveillance, vigilance, all of this. And it is in this very difficult situation that you had Krishnaraj Wadiyar's widow, Lakshmi Ammani, who was literally kept in house arrest. She started negotiating with the British to put her family back, and she employed two people who belonged to the Mandyam Iyengar community, and they were called the Mysore Pradhans, Tirumal Rao and Narayan Rao, and they used to carry her messages all the way to Madras, to the governor of Madras, the British governor. And that kept happening all through. And that also, I mean, there are stories as to how when Tipu came to power, he said there's no need to keep this stupid person on the throne. I am the supreme king. Why should I give, obeisance to someone who has no power? So he abolished the title of the Maharaja. He became the supreme ruler. He called Mysore.
And no resistance to him from the public?
People had no option. There was like so much of violence, so much of...
but because his father and him had consolidated so much power.
So much by then that it was very difficult to do anything. This was 1782 when he becomes, and he makes Mysore a Islamic kingdom, Sarkar-e-Khudadad. And the Wadiyar is further relegated to the background. And this Maharani, she's unable to go beyond her private chambers. The only outing she would have is to go to a temple called the Kille Venkatramana temple in the palace complex. And despite that, I mean, she would hide these letters that she would write to the British in the puja thali and take it to the temple. And there, while offering puja by sleight of hand and a wink and so on, these letters would be passed on to the priest, and he would then make those letters, take those letters to these pradhans who take it to Madras. So they kept these missions going. And in the Second Anglo-Mysore War, the Third Mysore War, the Wadiyar emissaries tried to get the kingdom back, but they got it only after the last Anglo-Mysore War in 1799, when Tipu Sultan was killed in Srirangapatna. And then the divided Mysore is then parceled off among the victors, the Marathas, the Nizams, the British, and the old royal family is reinstated. So that's why it's an interregnum. It was just a 40-year intermission, after which the original government comes back to power.
Right. When you talk about the interregnum period, let's zoom out for a bit and think about, in these 40 years, the four Anglo-Mysore wars that Tipu fought. His father fought none of the wars?
No, he fought two wars.
He fought
the first two wars, and Mysore scripted unprecedented victories in those wars. From a state where, as I mentioned, it had become such an emasculated kingdom where anyone who attacks the kingdom, you're just buying them off, paying large sums of money. From there to the fact to have a fighting fit army, to build a navy, to have these rockets and so on, to cause terror in the opponent camp.
Right.
Hyder's foray in the first and the second Anglo-Mysore War is spectacular. In the first Anglo-Mysore War, he goes to the very gates of Madras, and which was a British seat of power, Fort St. George. And the British could have been exterminated from India at that time had he been a little more, aggressive.
But you said that since Mysore was the last stand, from 1760 to 1799, every other state had been copied by the British. This was the last.
No, by then, you had Plassey happening. Bengal had fallen. Awadh had almost capitulated. The main seats were all gone. The Marathas were the biggest, opponents. But after Peshwa Madhav Rao's death, the Maratha polity itself in Pune was a mess, because you had his uncle Raghunath Rao Raghoba, who kills the new Peshwa Narayan Rao. There is Nana Fadnavis who comes in. There's a council of ministers, the Barabhai, who carried on the administration. So the Marathas were as it is weak, especially after Madhav Rao's untimely death. So, and it was a matter of time before the Marathas also were defeated much later, 1818. But I said the last bastion of resistance because it was so difficult to subjugate Mysore as compared to the Marathas who later capitulated very easily. So in the first two wars, so as I said,
do you want me to turn the AC down a little?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
So in the first two wars, the success that Hyder got was really spectacular. He made the British sign a very humiliating treaty to end the first Mysore War in 1769, and then the second Anglo-Mysore War too. I mean, the kind of successes, but where the son also participated. It was several of those skirmishes Tipu Sultan led under his father's leadership. In the second Anglo-Mysore War, you had something called the Battle of Polilur, where Colonel Bailey of the British Army, the kind of defeat that man received, it is actually monumentalized in Tipu's palace in Srirangapatna, a huge propaganda art painting where the Lally on the French officer on Srirangapatna and Bailey on the other side. So it's called Lally Bailey Yuddha. And so that's where, Hyder and Tipu are like these macho men coming on an elephant and a horse. And Bailey is shown like this effeminate person sitting in a palanquin and twiddling his thumbs. And there was Hector Munro. So Hector Munro, who was the hero of Buxar and Plassey wars, who had defeated the Mughal emperor, the Nawab of Awadh, the Nawab of Bengal. He literally throws his weapons into a water tank in Kanchipuram and runs away to save his life in Madras. So that was the kind of terror that Hyder and his son in those first two wars brought on the British. In fact, the East India Company's stock price tumbled, hugely, and shockwaves went all the way to London. In the British Parliament, this was being discussed. The Court of Directors, gave a very tough time to the Governor General Hastings and others, saying, "What the hell is happening in Mysore?" And you're going after disaster after disaster. And to Tipu's credit, he concludes the second Anglo-Mysore War to complete advantage for himself, because right in the midst of the war, Hyder dies in the second Anglo-Mysore War in 1782.
He's killed in battle?
No, he has a back cancer and he actually dies in the war camp. And Tipu, the onus of it comes on him. And so since the war had already been fought for so long, he concludes it brilliantly. He uses great statecraft. He sieges the British almost in Mangalore for several months, and they're reduced to pitiable condition of actually eating rodents and all of that to survive within Mangalore fort.
Really?
Yeah.
This is despite the fact that they have reinforcements in practically every other state of the country.
They managed to cut everything. That was Tipu's statecraft then, to ensure that they were literally starving for provisions. So from Bombay, the consignment would come. He would intercept it midway. From Madras, whichever, from the sea routes, anything comes, replenishments for the army, he would manage to intercept. And to just get done with this war, the British signed yet another extremely humiliating treaty called the Treaty of Mangalore in 1784. And this perhaps, Vinamra, is the last document where an Indian power had an upper hand when it signed a treaty against the British. So to that effect, I think he inherited the kingdom and showed great promise at the start. But after that, there was a steady downfall.
I'm going to use a Gen Z term to probably understand the difference between Hyder and his son Tipu. See, Hyder is not old money exactly. He was from the streets, right? And he usurped the throne and became king. Tipu was born with generational wealth, like many would say. Tipu was the son of the new king and then the king himself, the Sultan, right?
Yes.
So Tipu's childhood is filled with palaces and richness and a kind of religious fervor that I don't know how he gets. Tipu becomes the larger figure and Hyder is sort of ignored, barring the fact that you've written a book where you also give equal weightage to his father, right? How does the son outshow the father? And where does this religious fervor come from? Because I'm going to use some passages to describe it later on. But he becomes a devout Muslim.
Yeah.
And he wants to, I think, I'm going to read this out. You said Tipu had immense antipathy for non-Muslims and considered it his religious duty to inflict a holy war or jihad against them.
Yeah. Yeah, so, Hyder, given his troubled childhood, the kind of circumstances we spoke about, he never got education all his life. The only literary achievement of his life was to learn to sign the first alphabet of his name, which was H. And beyond that. But he was multilingual. He spoke effortlessly. He could speak Kannada, Marathi, Tamil, Telugu, Hindustani, all these languages, even a bit of English and French. He knew nothing of Persian and Arabic. But he wanted his sons, Tipu and a younger brother called Karim to get the best of education, and he puts them under some Maulvi. He obviously doesn't know. He's not educated himself to know what they're learning. So a couple of years later, he does a mock examination of the sons, and he's aghast by what his son, is speaking, and he loses his temper on the Maulvi and the son, and then rues that, what sort of religious bigotry has been snuffed into my son's mind. And
so his father was more secular than Tipu.
I wouldn't say secular, but he didn't think of religion and faith so much. He was hardly a devout Muslim himself.
He was an opportunist.
For him, the faith came secondary. As long as he had his thirst for power quenched, it didn't matter, what else happened. And that is there in several anecdotes of that kind. So he's supposed to have dismissed the Maulvi and said, at this rate, my son is going to become a good mullah, but not a great ruler. And so just dismiss him and stop feeding these religious bigotry into his head. So I think the seeds of that were sown very early in Tipu's life, which is what germinated. And so even in his library in Srirangapatna, which the British captured after his death, there are lots of other good books on various subjects, but a significant section is on jihad, on what a mujahideen has to do, what a ghazi needs to do, a religious warrior. In fact, the military treatise that his confidant Zainul Abidin Shustri writes is called the Fathul Mujahideen, which talks about the various aspects of holy war or jihad that they had to fight. But as you said, Hyder had no care for what religion people followed. In fact, there is another anecdote in the book where, the Ranganatha Swami temple in Srirangapatna, there's a procession of the deity that is going in front of a Islamic seminary. And like it happens now, some of them came from there and started pelting stones on the Rath. So first day, the Hindus got scared and they were dispersed. The next day, they came better armed with their clubs and weapons, and they managed to push through, defeat these people, and the procession went past. Now the Pirzada of that seminary, he was very angry. He goes to Hyder and complains, saying, this is what these people did to me. He hears the whole story and asks him, who cast the first stone? He said, we did it. So then obviously, what do you expect from the other side? They will also retaliate and hit you back. So he says, but how can they do this? I mean, how can we allow idolatry to flourish in a Muslim kingdom? So he turns back and says, who told you this is a Muslim kingdom? I am but a servant of the Hindu Maharaja. And and the Pirzada is so angry. He says, this is the case, I'm going to leave Srirangapatna and go. He says, you can be my guest, go where you please. And so he, in a huff, he goes away to Madras. He's not happy there. He wants to come back, and Hyder doesn't allow him to come back. So there's so many such anecdotes. In fact, the Dutch governor also records that Hyder had stopped the slaughter of cattle, cows and bulls and all in the kingdom because they were sacred for the Hindus. He allowed the Dasara procession, which is such a famous festival even now in Mysore, to carry on unabated there. So all those aspects. So he was a real politic. He was steeped in real politics.
Yeah, you make him sound like a very pragmatic man.
Pragmatic, very cunning. He knew that if his power has to, last, he had to take the Hindus along. He couldn't afford to belittle their faith and so on. And so some of his closest associates were all Hindus, including Purnaya, who was his divan. And when Hyder dies in the middle of the war, in the war camp, Purnaya was the one who managed to keep that news secret, because imagine right in the middle of the war when the enemy is right there, if you got to know that the king itself had died, it would create an alarm in the army and so on. So Purnaya manages to stage such a drama that time, that as if large chests of gifts are coming from the caliph, and every day there's a mock parade happening. Nagadas are beaten, bugles are blown to say that he's alive, and he's receiving these gifts and sending them back. In one of those chests, his dead body is also kept and taken back to Srirangapatna.
That's so smart.
Yeah, till the time. So Tipu was at that time away in Malabar, in North Kerala, crushing a rebellion there. So till he came, someone had to hold the fort. So Purnaya, who was a Hindu, who was a Madhva Brahmin, actually was the one who, kept the fort literally safe. It's quite a thing that this man himself turns a traitor under Tipu and for which Tipu himself was responsible.
Man, I love that you've transported me back to this era. It's so fascinating what you do. I'm thinking about this son fighting off a campaign in Malabar, unaware that his father is dead. It's very much like running a family business today, where you all have to fight out various different fires.
Yeah.
I guess then the real question is, so, the seeds of religious fervor turning into zeal and idolatry and bigotry are sown in Tipu's childhood.
Yeah.
Then at what point does he start enacting out en masse? Does he start doing it when his father dies? What are some of the first steps he takes to show the fact that he's in fact a deeply radical Islamic ruler, hell-bent on creating his state and furthermore the rest of the country possibly into an Islamic country?
Right. So, I mean, even while he was young, as I said, though Hyder had banned the killing of cattle, as a young boy, this guy would go hunting specifically to kill oxen, for which Hyder had been so incensed with him. He had given him solitary confinement as punishment for several days. No one was allowed to even talk to him. Even food had to be, passed on from under the, it was almost like a jail. Under the door, you pass on the food to him. And Hyder constantly rued among his confidants that what all I have built with so much of, hard work, my son is going to squander it away because he doesn't have the tact, he doesn't have the wisdom. He thought very lowly of his son's intelligence, and that is documented time and time again. In fact, the father-son dynamic, in psychology terms, you have father wounds.
Yeah.
I think that leads to you becoming a different man when you grow up. So, in fact, even William Kirkpatrick, who translates some of these dreams and letters from Persian that Tipu had written, he also says maybe, the harsh punishments that his father always gave him made Tipu such a cruel man himself, and who could brook no, disagreement, who could not tolerate any mistake, and for everything he would come like a ton of bricks on anybody. There's another incident where in a battle with the Marathas, Tipu does something intemperate and Hyder loses his cool and he takes a cane and in front of the whole army whacks his butt.
That's very emasculating for a young prince
to in front of everyone to be insulted. So he throws a tantrum. He dashes his turban and his sword and says, "To hell with you and your war. I'm not going to fight with you anymore. Go to hell," and runs away somewhere. And later, of course, after that war, there's also an agreement that he signs for his father, which the British discover after Tipu's death in his palace. It has 8 articles where Tipu is saying, if I steal money from others, then you can flog me. If I do this, I will not, do idle talk or conspiracies against the Sarkar. If I do, you can execute me. So from petty crimes to big things like intrigue, which means he was doing something like this, and the father thought so low of him that he actually made an agreement which the son had to sign, and the last line was, I am signing this, hosho hawaz mein main sign kar raha hu ye pura cheez, and putting his sign and the royal emblem also. So, and Hyder had so many other men, Sheikh Ayaz, Muhammad Ali, whom he would always have adopted sons, and he would keep saying, that these people will be better successors for me. So in fact, when Tipu comes to power, one of the first things he does is to get rid of this Sheikh Ayaz, who was like a competitor. I think very an inferiority complex ridden childhood that he had, that manifested itself. And so this assertion that he wanted to assert himself in all ways became more rife once he came to power. And as I said, Islamizing Mysore, calling it Sarkar-e-Khudadad, or a God-given kingdom. Persian replaced Kannada and Marathi as the court language in Mysore. And all the names of places were Islamized. Mysore became Nazarabad, Coorg became Zafarabad, Calicut became Firokhabad. So the long list of all the names getting changed. He started minting his own coins with Persian numerals and Persian written to a Kannada speaking, kingdom which wouldn't understand that. And forget, the Islamic lunar calendar was also dispensed with, along with, of course, the Hindu Panchang. And he started his own calendar system called the Maududi calendar, so which had its own way of calculating days of the month and all that. So it was almost like Tughlaqi Farmans that he started, and many people talk about this too, that fine irrigation works, palaces, forts, which the Wadiyar rulers had built over centuries, they would all be demolished, and in its place, you build another, just to stamp your authority over it. And both father and son, one thing about them is they had this deep insecurity in their minds, and they knew that they were usurpers. And so anybody, the weakest link for them would be to talk to them about their class and lineage. So in fact, Hyder, he in fact used his good offices with the Maharaja to also get a proclamation out that anybody who calls me Nayak, so in the army he was just a Subedar Nayak type of a thing.
Right.
So people would call him Hyder Nayak. So he got a proclamation announced that anybody who calls me Nayak should have their tongue cut off. So, today the proclamation will go immediately on social media. Everyone knows it. Those days it took time for that proclamation to percolate to everybody. And one poor guy who actually called him Nayak had his tongue cut off. So, you come to know the deep class consciousness that they had. They tried to elevate their ancestry. They wanted to get into matrimonial alliances with the Nizam of Hyderabad. And every time that fellow would rebuff them, saying, you are of low descent, we cannot marry into your family.
Yeah.
And Tipu too had that insecurity and inferiority complex.
Yeah.
And that is why, to get the legitimacy to rule Mysore, he sends several letters to Delhi, to the Mughal, saying, I am the true Badshah. So can you install me as can you give me the legitimacy to rule? But the Mughal himself is so weak, he's not able to. So he sends an emissary all the way to the Caliph, the Ottoman Caliph, and says, I am the true Muslim ruler. And there he gloats. I'm a great Muslim ruler. I have killed so many kafirs. I have burnt so many things, temples and churches. So you call me the Badshah of Mysore. Because that agreement that Hyder had signed with the deposed Maharaja, it was not a hereditary claim. It didn't automatically come to the son.
Right.
So you needed a legal, system.
You wanted a few prefixes that they would say before they call your name.
So Sultan, Nawab Tipu Sultan, Bahadur, all these other honorifics to his name, constantly wanting all these. And in the midst of all this bigotry that was there also led to the kind of excesses that he committed against various communities, whose trauma lives even to this day. You had the Mandya Mayangars in Mysore. 700 of them, men, women and children, were ruthlessly slaughtered on the day of Naraka Chaturdashi before Diwali. And see the kind of trauma that that community has. Even to this day, while all of us celebrate Diwali, that group does not celebrate Diwali on the day the rest of India celebrates. It's observed as a day of mourning or Shraddh, and much later they celebrate Diwali. And this also with some sense of make-believe. He would assure them something and literally stab them in the back. Similarly, his campaigns in Coorg, in Malabar, they led to rampant massacres of thousands and lakhs of Nayars and the Kodavas. And the Kodavas, even to this day, people in Coorg hate this man. Every year on the 12th of December, there is a Martyrs' Day that the Kodavas commemorate, where on 12th December 1785, he invites thousands of Kodavas to a place called Devati Param and gives them a false assurance that we'll have peace negotiations. And they are told to come unarmed. And when they come there, you know what happens. They're all encircled and a mass massacre happens of all these people. And similarly, the Nayars too in Malabar, in northern Kerala, which we have, the top districts of Kerala today. There too, right from Hyder's time, though he wanted to extend his kingdom up to the frontier of Kerala because that gave easy access to the ports to go to the Middle East or to Europe. Now there the Nayars, who were a warrior class, never gave up and they constantly pushed back against him. And the kind of tortures they faced, I've documented heart-wrenching details of these tortures. He would in fact sit there and Hyder, in fact, 5 rupees for every Nayar head and 5 rupees for every Kurgi head. And so there's a description once that almost 700 heads have already come in Coorg. And the Kurgis are these, fair-skinned, beautiful people. They're very chivalrous. So one head comes of a young boy who's very pretty. And seeing that, he takes pity and says, oh, what a beautiful face. So let us stop killing people. So had that face not been beautiful, there would have been several others who would be, beheaded. So that cruelty which I mentioned, which is of inherent with kingship that son and father both had in some to large extent. But the problem with the son was he specifically targeted these people, the Iyengars there. Similarly, the Canara Christians, the Christians of Mangalore, the kind of misery even to this day, I think people there, talk about it. They have that wound in their hearts. Konkani literature is full of lots of these tortures they have. So also the Kurgi, oral history called this Pattole Palame, which has the details of what he did to them. In Mangalore too, almost 60,000, 70,000 Christians literally dragged all the way from Mangalore to Srirangapatna, about 300 kilometers. Many of them dragged tied to the feet of elephants, pregnant women made to march, many of them delivering babies on the way. There's no way to even conduct a funeral for the dead. Dogs and jackals are feeding on their corpses. 27 odd churches in Mangalore being completely demolished, including the Milagres Church, which is a famous church which was rebuilt in Mangalore later. And after they came to Srirangapatna, unless they converted to Islam, their lips and noses would be cut off and they would be paraded on donkeys all over the city. And that also for the Christians, he did it on a day which was very sacred for them, called Ash Wednesday.
I know Ash Wednesday.
Before Easter, 6 weeks of...
Yeah.
So, if it was not just political opposition, it was because you wanted to culturally and religiously subjugate them. You choose the day which is sacred for that community. For the Hindu, the Iyengars, you chose Deepavali. For them, you choose Ash Wednesday. And inflict that sort of, cruelty on them. So that really shows that it was not just, kingship is violent, so he was as violent as the rest of them. He was extra violent because he took clearly into mind the fact that their religious minorities had to be targeted.
Two vital questions from this, and no, the sound of this won't come in here, no worries. Number one, what about his reputation in our history books, NCERT, growing up from 97 to, I guess I was in school to 2014, about showing Tipu Sultan as a freedom fighter, as someone who fought against the British. And second, look, on the top of Karnataka, you've got Maharashtra, which has a strong Maratha empire. I don't know if it's still prevalent around his time. On the right side, toward the west, you've got Hyderabad, or erstwhile Hyderabad, right? So you at least have other Hindu warriors, if at all, who could perhaps step into this kingdom and stop these persecutions. You also had the Hyderabadi Nizam, who also had power aspirations, but was more sort of realpolitik, friends with the British, that kind of guy. Did they not intervene? Was his power so unchecked that he was able to basically do as he pleased? So, first, I would love your response on this. And second, we can talk about his reputation even as a contemporary freedom fighter.
Yeah. No, I don't think, Vinamra, that that kind of religious consciousness was so much prevalent. Sometimes even I feel even the Marathas come across in this book not smelling of roses, because they were also invading Mysore, even when Mysore was under a Hindu Raja. And the kind of excesses they commit just to collect Chaut and Sardesh Mukhi. The Hindu Raja...
Sorry, what's Chaut?
The taxes that they had to pay. Chaut 1/4. Ek chauthai.
Okay.
So that is what they would constantly keep raiding, almost like looters who'd come and take revenue out, and the Wadiyar would just pay them off and send them away and so on. This father and son at least pushed back and fought with them. Though there were 3 wars that he fought against Madhavrao Peshwa, and he lost all of them, and terribly. In fact, Hyder and Tipu had to literally run away as dressed as beggars, fakirs, literally, when they were encircled once, and their downfall was almost imminent. So to that extent, that consciousness itself, I don't know that it's a Hindu kingdom. We have to they never had that. But the consciousness seems to be quite rife in Tipu's mind, because in 1786 he issues a proclamation, kind of a manifesto of his, where he clearly enunciates that the goal of my government is to create, to purge all the infidels. So he signs this proclamation to a manifesto where he clearly says that the goal of his government is to get rid of the infidels, the kafirs. And similarly, on his sword, you have an inscription which says this sword is to drench itself in the blood of kafirs. So that consciousness seems to have been very, very much there on his mind. And the problem for people who whitewash him is the fact that unlike Hyder, Tipu was extremely educated, and he was a prolific writer. He wrote so much, copiously, letters, his own dream registers, everything he documented, and his subordinates would send back reply letters. So all that is there, and as I said, in these very letters, he gloats over the fact that I have committed these crimes. In fact, in Coorg, he sends a letter which is shocking, in fact, to Zainul Abidin Shustri. He says not only those prisoners who have been caught alive, even the dead should be converted. So even dead bodies being circumcised and converted to Islam.
But he's getting it from religious texts that he read as a kid. Does he have a retinue of Maulvis or jihadists like informing his decisions?
Yes, a lot of those, because as I mentioned, he wanted legitimacy for his rule from the Middle East. Now, mind you, in the Delhi Sultanates too, the Tughlaqs, the Khiljis, Lodhis, they all sought permission to rule India from the Caliph.
Yeah.
It was only the Mughals, the Ottoman Caliphs, and it was only the Mughals who were a departure from that. They said, to hell with him, we'll do it ourselves. But this guy goes back to that tradition, and in the process, he sent several emissaries, embassies, big, royal embassies, which go all the way to the Middle East, to Turkey, to the Shah of Persia, to all these places. And that was the time when this Wahhabi ideology was gaining ground there.
In Saudi Arabia?
Yes. Yeah. And so obviously there was some interchange, maybe a lot of that, of the purest form of Islam, and how you need to treat people who don't belong to your fold. All of that seemed to have percolated to him there. And so people who say, oh, but he didn't do these things within Mysore, the intent was there. It's just that he was waiting for the right opportunity. The opportunity not presenting itself doesn't mean at all that the intention was not there, which is made clear, as I said, by his own writings. There is no need to sugarcoat that or whitewash that or undermine. When you say, primary source-based research, here your protagonist himself is writing about it, and we don't want to take him at face value and say, oh, I think he won't be exaggerating his own excesses. So it's a little odd that, we try to cover up so many things.
But you yourself say in the book that there is a dichotomy between his gifts to temples. He's given several grants to temples, much like his father. But he's also at the same time doing forced conversions, desecrating temples.
Yeah.
So when you were doing the research for this book, how did you balance the dichotomy? To the point, you also say on the last day of his life, he brings in Brahmin priests and astrologers to speak with him and do japas for him.
Yes.
Right. So I clearly understand that he's copying these people because he's scared of his life. He believes he works very much from his unconscious mind. He lets his psyche influence his decisions, as opposed to, taking purely strategic decisions that a real centric king like his father would take. But does he offer some kind of mercy to these Hindus, because there are grants, there are gifts?
So yes, so that is also a very difficult thing to analyze, because of course in one chapter called The Bloodied Legacy, chapter 20, I document all these, not only the grants but also the numerous temples that he broke in Mysore, in Kerala particularly, which are still bearing the brunt. Now these grants also, if you see, these were probably carried on from the past, because I'll give one instance. So in the list of grants which one report of the 1914 or 1915 talks about, that has grants to the Guruvayur temple in Kerala, the famous Guruvayur temple there. Now, it so happens that he actually sent an army to demolish the idol, the deity there, Guruvayur Appan. And the Brahmin priests get to know about it before, and they take away the idol, and it is put in a safe place elsewhere at this place called Ambalapula. And this place, Ambalapula, where temporarily that deity was housed, and after Tipu's death, it goes back to where it is today. That place is still worshipped because this place gave temporary shelter to our Lord. So it is very likely that many of these grants possibly started in Hyder's time, and either Tipu just continued that, or some of the officers in the middle interceded or kept it as a secret from him. For instance, in Guruvayur, you had this man called Hydros Kutti, who was actually a converted Nayar. So obviously there was still affinity to your previous religion. So he he's the one who's credited with protecting the Guruvayur temple when Tipu wanted to attack it. So there could be numerous such examples, including lot is made of a shivling which people say was donated by Tipu to the Nanjangud temple in near Mysore. But actually the records state that this was given by Hyder when one of his favorite elephants falls sick. So someone says, the god here is very, good in curing maladies. And so some incantations are done and the elephant becomes fine. And so as a thanksgiving, Hyder gives a green spatik, shivling, which is called Hakim Nanjunda. Hakim hai, he actually gives good health. But people pass that off also as Tipu's benevolence. So some things he could have done, as you said, to co-opt that community. So in the third Anglo-Mysore War, when the Marathas invade, there is that shameful incident of the Pindaris or the irregulars in the Maratha army actually attacking Sringeri. And Sringeri was one of the cardinal mutts which Adi Shankaracharya had established. Even the Sharda Devi Murti is vandalized, and that sends shock waves back in Pune because the Shankaracharya decides to go on a fast unto death. And then the Peshwa writes several apologetic letters to the Shankaracharya saying, "We are very sorry, we didn't intend to do this. We will give you money to rebuild the mutt. Please don't end your life." Tipu probably gets to know about this and he sends a letter to the Shankaracharya saying, "Don't take money from Pune. I will give you money to rebuild this temple. In return, you please do a havan, a jap for my long life." And the Shankaracharya actually does that also. He does a Shat Chandi havan, a Sahasra Chandi jap to help Tipu win against the Marathas. So it's a very complicated.
So he wants a Hindu soothsayer to pray for his long life and use his incantations and mantras to ensure that he's fine.
While he can break the Hindu temple, confiscate grants to Hindu temples. So the hypocrisy of it all, that, the same Brahmins whom he stripped off all the grants and the temple pujas that were done. In fact, Louis Rice says by the time of his death in 1799, there were hardly 4 or 5 temples in all of Mysore where regular pujas were conducted. There was no money that was given to temples.
What about the religious life of people in Mysore at that point?
Obviously, it was suffering. The temples were under decay. And there was a reason for that because he loses the Third Anglo-Mysore War terribly. Lord Charles Cornwallis comes there.
This is when the
1791.
The British, the Nizam and the
it's a
Marathas
tripartite alliance. And he loses half his kingdom. He has to give a war indemnity of about 3.5 crores, which was much exceeding the state budget those days. And to get that, 2 of his sons, Abdul Khalik and Mahizuddin, he has to give away as hostages to the British. And so to get his sons back within 2 years, he has to bring them back by paying this huge sum. So he takes back all the grants that were hitherto being given to temples. He has to raise money and oppressive taxes, and particularly for the Hindus. So there also there's a discriminatory policy where Muslims were exempt from several taxes, but only the Hindus were taxed extra to raise all the funds needed. But at the same time, while he was confiscating the money, he is also asking the Shankaracharya and other Brahmin priests to pray for him. And for their dakshina or whatever else, they were also doing it. So, it's a very complex age and time.
What a strange society. Despite all of this, he could be a very religious, radical Muslim, but he maintained a harem. In your book, you say that he has got servants, eunuchs, and 333 women.
Yes.
Right? I'm not sure of the popular standards in erstwhile harems about if this is a big number, if this is a small number. And you said, in fact, there were 601 women, 268 for Hyder and the rest for him.
Yeah.
So despite wars, despite the religious zealotry, despite the conversions, despite the resistance against the British, he still finds time to maintain such a large harem. I'm asking this simply as zooming out. Is this a consequence of the times?
I guess so. I think, and more so, Tipu was not as much, but his father was a huge womanizer. And so he always had an eye for the pretty young thing. So, and there was this fable of this, even today, in several parts of Karnataka, you have a soothsayer woman who's called a Korvanji, who goes around with beating a little drum. And then people allow her into the house and she sees the palm and foretells future. So she was employed, this lady soothsayer, by Hyder, while she went to the villages, she would gain easy access to the houses of villagers.
Yeah.
So if she spotted a young girl who was pretty, immediately she would take the news back to Hyder, and the next day the armies would kidnap that girl and she would find her place in the harem.
Yeah. And these were young girls also, 9-10 years old.
Yes, several of them. And there are lots of reports of how young, girls were. And young boys would be picked up, castrated, made eunuchs of, and they would also, be put to all kinds of...
No, but I don't understand this. I've read this briefly, I think, about the Ottoman Empire. They had this eunuch army who would...
Yes.
I forget their names. It's on the tip of my tongue. But why make eunuchs of young boys? Like, what's the intent?
I mean,
to serve as administrators?
No, and also to guard the female apartments and zanana, because,
I see.
You're then not a threat. You're...
I see.
So you can be trusted. So yeah, this kind of torture. So he also used to do, but yeah, I don't think Tipu had that much time for sensual pleasures to that extent, at least. But he captured several people, including the Coorg princess. There's this so the Coorg royal family is put in prison, and when he invades Coorg and kills most of these people, like I mentioned, dead Coorgis also converted. He visits this fortress where the royal family is imprisoned, and his eyes fall on the young princess, Veeram Maji or Neela, one of them, and she is also abducted. And two princesses of the Coorg family are also they made part of the harem. In fact, Purnaya's own niece is also part of the harem. The same Purnaya who was such a loyalist, who helped keep his father's death a secret and helped in the smooth transition of power. His own niece being in the harem is quite something. In fact, there is an episode where in the open court, he tells Purnaya that you're such an intelligent man, so why don't you convert and come to our side? Now, this guy is a very cunning, person and artful badger, survivor. So he quickly, yes, as you say, Huzur, and he makes a hurried exit. Then it is said that Tipu's mother was sitting in the women's apartment, the chambers in the Parda. She comes out into the court and admonishes her son, saying, your father never did such things. If you continue to do such stupid things, your end is near, because you will lose the confidence of everybody around you. And so she would have a very strict control over him. But even that advice seems to have fallen on deaf ears. And particularly after the Third Anglo-Mysore War and his loss there, I think whatever little confidence he had in the Hindus, particularly the Brahmins, that also went away. And after that, you see his steady downfall, because he starts taking, and people document that, he employs Muslims in every stream of administration, army, illiterate Muslims also, who did not know. The only criteria to enter is you belong to that religion.
So you went nuts.
Yeah, and so what would happen to the administration? So you had and surrounded completely by sycophants, by people who would just not tell him the truth or give him good counsel. He started having this huge hubris and arrogance that I can do no wrong. In fact, there's one instance where his army is advising him, let's not go ahead in Kerala because the monsoons, how it is there. And he pompously says, do you think I can't advise the clouds to stop? They will listen to my orders. So he goes ahead. Obviously, the clouds didn't listen to him, and the whole army gets stuck in a quicksand. So these kind of things, foolhardy kind of things that he did, you almost see him scripting his own disaster chapter by chapter by chapter. And by the time he is actually killed in Srirangpatna eventually, I think he has only himself to blame and no one else.
I am friends with many astrologers. Many of them are my dear friends. One astrologer friend of mine told me that sometimes politicians will come to him with their opponent's charts and say, how can I bring this guy down? And when I speak to my astrologer friends, I'm surprised that those in power are the ones who consult these guys the most. I'm wearing 2 rings, so obviously I'm guilty as charged of falling prey to this mystical science, as many say. But it's a tricky terrain, because you never know when you go from let me seek good guidance to let me deliberately have multiple opinions, and ultimately you start only surrounding yourselves with, like many people do, astrologers who will give you remedies for immortal life or help you prevent some tragedy. So this business of soothsayers has always fascinated me, where you will have someone saying, I had a bad omen. Okay, let's fix this omen by doing this special ritual. And kings have always done this in the past. They will perform in incredible, like in Hinduism, we've got the Ashwamedha ritual, and many others, right? Let's talk about this man's inner private life, his divinations, his tries with mysticism, and all the ways in which he uses his dreams and soothsayers to inform his decisions. I can, for instance, I can start with one of his dreams where he is with a handsome man, and then man is converted into a beautiful woman. And then his interpretation is that it stands for the Marathas, and they're all secretly women, effeminate, right?
Yeah. So yeah, I think so. After this, particularly the defeat in the third Mysore war, he becomes so insecure about himself. He can't trust his right hand, can't trust his left hand. He sleeps in a suspended hammock in his royal chambers because he feels someone is going to secretly assassinate him. So all kinds of things, and in that uncertainty, he also learns astrology himself. So he's quite proficient in reading his own chart, and all the time, everything is done with the help of astrologers who will tell him what to do. In fact, on the last day of his life too, he has this that morning on 4th of May 1799, a very momentous day in the history of India. An iron pot full of oil, he's looking into it, his reflection, nazar utarne ke liye or whatever, and then he's confiding with them, when do I go out to fight, the transit of Mars, what is that happening, all these kind of things.
So he goes that detailed.
Yeah. And I think this whole business of dreams, he was a very, very vivid dreamer. And it is said that every day he would wake up and actually spend about 2 hours in his toilet, where he would sit and write these dreams down, which he saw the previous night. And I managed to access the original handwritten dreams of this man, which still lie in the British Library.
Persian?
In Persian, yes.
Yeah.
So he was writing in Persian, everything. There's hardly anything in Kannada.
Then how did you get it translated?
I had initially tried to learn Persian, and that ended in a huge disaster. So I said, okay, I'll rather employ someone to translate them for me. Those dreams are also full of violence, full of gore, as you said. Prophet Muhammad appears, or there is an angel who comes and tells, go so far, kill that, break this. There's a strange cow that comes, which he actually is a
considers an enemy.
It's actually the Travancore Raja, and then he cuts off its legs and all kinds of things like this, which are very, very, and he wants to break the Saligram, the sacred stone for Vaishnavas, which as an embodiment of Lord Vishnu. So, in fact, I got some of those dreams even psychoanalyzed, because dreams,
yes, please talk to me about that.
Yeah, because dreams are index of your subconscious mind, what you're constantly thinking about. And it came out very clearly there that this man was consumed by hatred, consumed by violence, and there was probably not a single day in his life when he didn't have a fight or a war to engage himself in. In fact, look at the amount of hatred that he had, that even in his room you had this tiger toy which he used to play with every day apparently. It is a huge contraption of a tiger, actually wooden contraption of a tiger attacking a fallen British soldier, and it had a crank or something which you had to turn. And then the entire thing would, rotate, and there would be growls of the tiger and the howls and shrieks of the man. And it is said he would keep listening to this every day to give himself inspiration that I have to attack the British this way. And the tiger was the motive of his kingdom. So it's like the Sarkar-e-Khudadad feasting on the East India Company. So there was this unbridled hatred that he, of course, had. You had asked another question earlier, which I think I forgot answering, which was about this whole elevation of him as a freedom fighter.
Yes.
Which, as I said right at the beginning, there is no doubt that he was a brave soldier, a warrior, and that he was supremely anti-British, that he hated. This tiger toy is an embodiment of that hatred. But freedom fighter, calling him a freedom fighter is like stretching the truth, to a absurd extent, because in this fight against the British, he was actually taking the support of the French, and the French were no less colonial than the British. So if he had won, in Karnataka today, we would all be speaking French instead of Kannada, and we would be ruled by another colonial power. The French were as imperialist in their designs right from the Carnatic Wars, and so the French he would appeal on the basis of their rivalry with the British, which they had right from Europe.
Yeah.
And the hatred and rivalry of the British and the French played itself out in the politics of India all through the 18th century. So he was just doing one against the other there. But to the Islamic world, the larger Ummah or the Brotherhood, he was appealing to their religious sentiments. As I said, all these achievements, he was wearing them as medals of honor. I've killed so many Hindus, I've killed so many Christians, I've broken so many temples. So I am the, pure Muslim ruler, not the Mughal. He's come under the, protection of a kafir, Mahadji Sindhya. And so, break bread with me. Rather, we'll become allies. So he writes letters to all these people, the Shah of Persia, the Turkey Sultan, the Caliph, all these people. And also 2 years before he dies, he writes his letter to Zaman Shah, the Afghan ruler, Durrani ruler. And there's a clear plan that invade India. For 2 years, let's do this. The first year, let's flush off all of northern India from Kafirs. And then second year, let's, flush out the south from Kafirs. And then let us meet midway and then divide this whole subcontinent among ourselves and declare this as an Islamic caliphate. So such is the freedom fighter who wanted to actually establish either French rule or an Islamic caliphate is what India would have become. And even, 2 years before he dies, he has this, there's another tale of the absurd, which I would urge readers to read in the book, of this French guy called Ripaud. He comes ostensibly from Mauritius, but he's an imposter, he's a crook. So he comes there and tells him that we have kept a large army of about 10,000 people ready for you to fight the British. And so all his, advisors say, we find something fishy about this report. Let's not trust him. But this guy has lost his sense of, discretion. He is so taken in by report. They form a Jacobin club in Srirangapatna. And the Jacobins were the revolutionary, you had the French Revolution already there.
Yes.
And you had Louis XVI being beheaded and Mary Antoinette being executed. And you had the revolutionaries. And this Jacobin club was actually formed in Srirangapatna. There was a tree of equality, cap of equality planted, and he is called Citizen Tipu, and then they all, go around that
false
tree.
commemoration for
And he's singing the French national anthem, and he's Citizen Tipu for everybody. So it's a, and that report is such a fraud that, costly presents. He sends an entire embassy with him and his, emissaries to go to Mauritius, to the Isle of France, to get French support. And on the way, this report actually, pilfers all the treasures. He just escapes into thin air once they land in Mauritius. And out of 10,000 that were assured, only 99 people come to help Tipu. And even then, he doesn't realize that he has been fooled. So in fact, a very favorable biographer of him, Dennis Forrest, even he says at this juncture of his life, you see Tipu being inflicted by mental blindness and his story coming literally like a Greek tragedy into one where, absurdity, foolhardiness, it actually is a theatre of the absurd. You actually feel sorry at times, like where is his mental capacity to think and take decisions in a sensible manner? He writes to Napoleon Bonaparte, and there are exchanges of letters between him and Napoleon. And Napoleon,
what?
Napoleon promises to come from Egypt all the way and help him, and the British actually intercept all these letters. So they are building evidence against him brick by brick. They have intercepted all these letters. There is a Malartic proclamation by name in Mauritius, where clearly the French are saying we are going to assist Tipu in defeating the British and eliminating them from India. Then you have all these emissaries to Zaman Shah and all these people. So the British have built a case against him. And the last Anglo-Mysore war, when Richard Wellesley is sent there, he comes for the kill. Cornwallis still gave him a lease of life.
Yeah, because he has the highest amount of military forces at that point, right? He's ready to take over.
Yes. And so he has all this evidence and says, since you have planned to eliminate us, it is our right to counter you, to eliminate you. And that is how the fourth Anglo-Mysore War, the last Anglo-Mysore War, breaks out in 1799. And that also, the last few chapters which deal with that and his end, well, it is, as I said, a Shakespearean tragedy in the making. As it unravels verse by verse, you just see, you're blinded totally by your own hate, by your own megalomania that you're unable to see things as they are. And so it's a case study of how a leader should not be.
Fascinating, man. One thing that Carl Jung says, who's, I'm sure you know, in a lot of ways the successor to Freud's ideas, because Freud became a little neurotic.
Yeah.
Psychologists are split on that. But he said, if you don't pay attention to your subconscious, it's going to slowly dictate your life.
Yes.
For someone who paid so much attention to his subconscious, I think his strategy was that he let it run his life.
Yeah.
Right, where you're supposed to be as a king or a ruler, use logic sometimes against emotion, against strong impulses, and take decisions to preserve your power.
Yeah.
He, I think, based on your book, was completely taken by omens and dreams and soothsaying and fortunes and mysticism in a way that is not fitting a king.
Yeah.
Right? Do you think that beyond all the forces gathering against him, his extreme belief, delusion in his dreams and his, omens, was that a reason for his demise?
That also. But as I said, he, I think, embittered everyone, Hindus, Muslims alike. In fact, in the last war, it was his most trusted prime minister called Mir Sadiq, who actually cheats him, as much as Purnaya or anybody else does. So I think, and he had no one to give him good counsel. In fact, in the last few weeks before his death, there's a breach that is affected in the impregnable fort of Srirangapatna. He doesn't even have advisors who tell him that there is a breach. And he's living in this make-believe world. So in fact, I write, there are descriptions of his palace where in the heat of May of southern India, his inner chambers had these huge mats, for the on the windows, which are sprinkled with water. They give you a false assurance that it is so cool inside, but actually there's blazing sun outside. And that was very onomatopic, so to say, to actually demonstrate what was happening in his kingdom and his life. The British had literally come near the doorstep. And this man, even at that time, is sitting and looking at his face in a pot of oil or happily having his food. And then they tell him that the enemy is out right there. And a few weeks before itself, they had said that they're encircling us from all sides. There is one secret passage, a water gate or something in the fort. Why don't you run away from there? The French actually advise him. He initially says yes. He actually gathers his favorite women from the Zanana, some elephants and horses and lots of treasures. They're all kept ready. But on that fateful day when he tries to escape too, it is Mir Nadim, who is the Kiledar, and Mir Sadiq who close that last passage of exit. Then he goes to another exit passage, and Mir Sadiq is trying to close that as well. And this man looks at Mir Nadim and orders him to open it, and that man looks the other way. And that is when Tipu finally realizes that treachery has permeated through every brick and wall of the fort. But it is too late by then. There's nowhere to escape. So he literally decides, let me go out and face it in whatever way, which also was a foolhardy thing to do. But there was no option. He said
he could have surrendered, perhaps the only
He
one.
could have surrendered, but maybe that he did not want to do. That amount of self-respect and dignity he wanted to keep for himself, which is appreciable. But he goes there, he thinks that, if my army sees me right in the heart of the battlefield, maybe they'll get enthused. But even there, Mir Sadiq and Mir Nadim, when the British is just entering the fort, all the soldiers of the Mysore army are locked off in a room, promising payment of arrears and salary. So there's nobody to defend the fort as well. So you see the tragedy that unfolds. It actually, it's very, very Shakespearean. And I would like your viewers to read it to understand more, but just giving a trailer. And so this man then goes on his favorite mare that he gets on and goes to fight along with his physician, Raja Khan, who's coming with him. And there's
he brings his doctor because he's got no one else.
No one else to stand by him. He's literally all alone. But as I said, he has only himself to blame by then. So what your stupidity can lead you to, I think this is a case study of that. And the mayor gets shot, and then he's also his Tipu's leg is hurt, and so Raja Khan tries to put him into a palanquin, and in the process both of them tumble over each other and fall, and he tumbles and falls amidst a heap of dead bodies. And at that time, Srirangapatna is like a scene from hell, where there are, volleys of missiles going from both sides. There's some bomb that bursts, and lots of bodies are burnt in the process. Mangled masses of limbs, everything flying around, and this man is sitting there amidst these bodies, his leg being stuck there, watching, his whole kingdom collapse bit by bit in front of his eyes. And that is when a group of British soldiers come there. They don't even know that this is the Sultan of Mysore, because they didn't expect him to be there. By then his turban has fallen off. He's bald-headed. And so their attention is caught by a bejeweled gold, sword handle that he wore, belt. To get that, they try to attack him, and he attacks back, and they snatch away that belt from him. And then, who is this man? Why is he being so intemperate? And one of them takes a pistol and shoots him in the temple, and that's how, quite unceremoniously, he's killed in the battle. Now, by sunset, nobody knows where the Sultan has gone. His family is worried. The British, the day has ended, but they don't know where the man who was supposedly defending the fort has gone. So they go to his palace. There's a elaborate description of how the children react. They take 1 hour to come back. There's a carpet laid, and then the young boys, they're probably in their late teens, they have to come and confront a British opponent who comes there. The British think that he's hiding in the Zanana, or the women's chamber. So a search is done there. He's not to be found there. Is there any secret passage? They search there. No. By night, a search party then goes through the ramparts of Srirangapatna, which has literally become, a scene from hell again, with putrid bodies and decaying,
rotting
flesh, burning flesh, the embers of those bombs, everything still being there, and vultures have already encircled the place. And in the midst of this, they find this Raja Khan who is still alive, and they hear a groan or something. And these are first person accounts which the British have documented. Major Allen, Beatson, these people go on that search party with a mashal in their hand, and Raja Khan mentions that I think Tipu went in that direction. That's the last he has seen of his master. And when they go there, they have to literally remove dead bodies. In the midst of this, they find the corpse of this man. And Alan says his eyes were wide open, his body was warm, and his hand was still clasping the sword. And a lot of us thought he might suddenly spring up and attack us. But when we felt the pulse, the doubt was dispelled that he was dead. We raised a hurrah, and then the body was taken for a proper funeral. It was sent back to the palace. And after that, of course, his entire family gets of 600 women, 25 kids are all sent away to Vellore, where they try to instigate another rebellion. And then the British say, we've had enough of this. They're all packed off to Calcutta, which is where a lot of them, some remnants of the family are supposed to be still there, some in abject poverty. But a lot of people say this is perhaps poetic justice. They came from that Nagada on which his father was beaten upon, from that poverty to where they came from. And that was the life and arch of Hyder and Tipu and the Interregnum in Mysore.
Dude, I can't wait for you to get old, because you're gonna have so much stories with a big beard. I must really give you a compliment. I have never on my podcast ever had such a profound storyteller who goes to the depth of every exacting detail of someone's life. I mean, this is clearly your obsession. It's very evident. I have never had so much fun. You've literally, even though I've read parts of the book, the way you've delivered it to me today and for my viewers, it's a treat.
Thank you.
I'm gonna comb through the pages one by one. What a fascinating! Look how the mighty have fallen.
Yeah,
it happens everywhere. You rise up through the ranks of the world. You become emperor. You have this larger than life persona, and then ultimately your sword is auctioned off, and you're a relic of the past, right? Vikram, my final question to you on this is this: there's a foreword by S.L. Bhairappa, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, there have been many accounts of historians writing this book, right?
Yeah.
You have written perhaps the biggest, right? In terms of at least volume. Were the previous accounts of this book not justified? Were they maybe lacking in information? Because I think you being from this region really helps.
Yeah. No, I think there's never a final word, Vinamra, when it comes to history. I think a very famous historian had said every work of history is an interim report. So Otherwise, if everything about the past, if it's already written and carved in stone, we historians would go out of job. So it's always a constant revisiting of the past, looking at new sources, looking at new ways of perceiving the same past. I have tried to present everything that I could lay my hands on Tipu. And as you said, it's been an obsession for several years now. It's not something I just started now. So the sources, the story was something that was always there in my head. But I've tried to put everything under one roof to the extent that I have found as of today. So I've relied on Persian records, British records from London, the French records, the ones in Marathi, the Peshwa Daftar documents. From various and oral history of several of these communities, the Iyengars, the
What was
Kodavars.
the most difficult thing to get your hands on?
I think some of his Persian records are tough to get even in London. So I did somehow manage to. It took a lot of perseverance. But finally, since some of them are not in a great condition, to also get them translated was a huge challenge. And most of those are written in flowing hand. So it's very tough to even read them and make sense of them. But I've tried my best to decipher some of them too. So I'm sure this is not the last word, but as of now, I think everything that was possibly scattered in various places about Tipu, I've tried to put it under one roof, and that is why the size also is what it is. But I hope the size of the book is not intimidating, and the readability overpowers that at some way, and people get to read it, because I think it's a very, very fascinating account. Forget the polarization, forget the politics. Even as individuals, for us to know what works and what mistakes not to commit, where even when something is given to you on a platter, how your own hubris and your arrogance can let you squander it all away, even if you're an individual, a businessman, or whatever else. I think these lessons that one reads from a fascinating life and times of some people like this, that's what I think history comes alive for people.
I know I asked a final question, but I must really ask you this. Are you a dreamer as well? Do you have dreams?
Dreams? Well, yes, I don't dream
As of
vividly, but I have a vision in terms of a dream, and we were talking about that earlier. So I've started this foundation called the Foundation.
No, sorry. Before you say that, I just wanted to ask you, has the ghost of Tipu Sultan visited you in your dreams?
Okay.
Have you had visions of him?
Thankfully, no. But I think several times he's been constantly with me since the time I saw that serial by Sanjay Khan. I should thank Sanjay Khan, otherwise you wouldn't have had a historian sitting in front of you but for him. So somewhere I owe it to him, to Tipu. Thankfully, but yeah, I've been consumed by thoughts of this man because I tried to wrap my head around him, because he's such a, even in his wanton cruelty, which was there, a feudal autocrat that he was, there's just so many shades of his character that fascinate me to just investigate deeper. And I'm not saying it out of some eulogy to him. I'm saying just to understand how and why a person can be that cruel is also investigating something about the human mind. So thankfully I don't get to see him, and I don't want to see him also in my dreams.
And finally, last time we mentioned on a separate podcast about your archive of Indian music on SoundCloud. You said you had an update on that.
Well, yes, the archive itself has now become part of a larger umbrella called the Foundation for Indian Historical and Cultural Research, FIHCR, whose main goal is to foster new scholarship in Indian history. You said, do you have dreams? Do you have visions? I do have a vision in terms of what I need to do in this life. I think, especially after COVID, Vinamra, the second wave where I narrowly lost my life. It was just by an inch, I think I came back. Doctors had given up all hope of my survival then. So when I came back, I think since then, I'm deeply aware and conscious of my mortality. And the fact that, you are here on this earth for a limited period of time. And when you have that in mind, you know that you have a lot to finish before you go. And I thought a lot about this, that, okay, in my life, whatever is left of it, there may be a X number of books that I may write and go away from this world. But is that enough? Is there a need for a larger corpus of scholarship that we need to produce? And, in all these non-left conclaves of ours, all that we end up doing is demonizing Marxist historians. They have distorted in history.
Vikram, we have commentators, we don't have scholars.
Yes, because history and research is a lot of hard work, getting your hands dirty. No one has the patience for that.
Yeah.
Mr. Arun Shourie has exposed these people 20, 30 years ago in that eminent historian's book of his. So even today, in every conclave, lit fest that the non-left organizes, just having one imaginary voodoo doll of Romila Thapar, D.N. Jha, Irfan Habib, and keep sticking pins saying she did this, he did this, that just doesn't help. Even to this day, it's their books which are the textbooks in universities for UPSC exams. Where is the alternative scholarship that we have produced? There is none. I mean, to this day, maybe her word on ancient India is the last word. There's no one from the non-left who has written an alternative ancient Indian history to counter. And Twitter wars and, outrage on social media is not the alternative. The only and only alternative, according to me, to distorted history is scholarship, and more scholarship. So individually, I may be limited by so many, disadvantages. So I thought, why not institutionalize this? And especially since governments and so on are apathetic about this, let's not even continue to blame. That's another pastime that most of us have. Either blame Marxist historians or say, oh, Modi Sarkar ne kuch nahi kiya.
Or blame Nehru.
Blame Nehru for everything from a pothole to everything. So let's, for one, stop being cribbers and become doers, whatever little bit.
Let's create for a change.
And you have a favorable environment today in all ways, so why not do something? And that's how this idea of this FIHCR, Foundation for Indian Historical and Cultural Research, came up. And I'm really fortunate I had found a very dear friend and patron in Bhavesh Agarwal of Ola, who came forward and said, I'll support this as you grow. And the Ola as such helped us to make this into a proper institution. We've hired 8 people, and there are a few verticals that we have. The first one is fellowships, where we've given 8 fellows. We've just instituted it a couple of months back. It's in the name of Sir Jadunath Sarkar, the eminent historian. And we've selected, it's a nationwide selection process. We had interviews, and 8 of them were selected and given a substantial stipend of about 15 lakhs per annum over the year. And at the end of that 1 year, the ask is you need to come out with a publish-worthy manuscript. So imagine every year, 8-10 books added. In 10 years, you have 100 books. Then at least you have a menu card to choose from. There's an a la carte where, okay, I want to read Romila Thapar or I want to read someone who comes from this side.
So read both.
Both. Demonization is not what is done. Shatru Bodh actually, asks you to even read what someone you don't agree with has written, so that you can come up with a counter. And as I said at the start, the counter to a book, an article, is not outrage on Twitter, burning effigies, stabbing someone. It is a counter intellectual point. Finally, these are intellectual wars we are having, nothing personal against any of those people. So this scholarship, 8 people have come out with, and they're doing their work, a wide range of topics that they are working on. And in the process, I hope to help them if someone needs mentorship, and we'll help getting those books published also. So that was one vertical. There's another vertical called Projects Team, where we are collaborating with universities. We have one with Nalanda University, which has just started, where we are investigating the rise and fall of Buddhism in India. Now, see, most of our history is written in languages which we don't understand. Sanskrit, Persian, Arabic. We rely only on translations by Westerners, which may be either flawed or malicious or just ignorance.
Or oral history.
Now, these translations, in Sanskrit, one word can have 10 meanings, depending on the context. So unless you're really well versed in the language, you may be lost in translation.
Right.
Now, as a modern historian, for me to learn all those languages today and this thing like what I tried with Persian here, that would be, it'll take many lifetimes. So we thought, why don't we create a multidisciplinary team where a historian actually in this Buddhist project, we have, along with me, we have a Sanskrit scholar, we have a Buddhist monk, we have a person who knows Pali, Prakrit, Tibetan, and an archaeologist. Archaeologists and historians seldom talk to each other. So 6-7 of us together investigating the primary sources. Itihasa means literally translates into it thus happened. Ye aise hua. So let's go back to what has been written primary sources wise and investigate, and the outcome there would be I think about a book series, 3 or 4 books on Buddhism and academic journal articles and so on. The third vertical is called Yuva, which is again very close to my heart because we want to make history interesting, exciting and inspiring for our young people. So children from the age of 6 to 12 and young adults 12 to 20. History is not that boring subject which you just mug up and vomit, details in an exam and get money. It's a mirror in which you identify yourself as a country. So to make it interesting in the language they understand, it could be, Instagram reels, it could be animated videos, it could be podcasts, whatever. We are a nation of storytellers.
Make history great again.
Yeah.
MHGA.
MHGA. And we are a nation of storytellers. We've always, for generations, the same rubric of a Ramayana and Mahabharata, people all over our country have added to it and made it this colossal epic. So where did this art of storytelling disappear from our lives? Where our own stories, all these are such fascinating tales of another era, but it can be told in a beautiful manner.
Yeah, I think regional stories sadly remain closeted to the regions because of language constraints, because of lack of scholarship, because of unverifiable accounts and whatnot.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Yuva seeks to, plug that, animated videos, children's books. We're trying all kinds of things there. We have also instituted a national essay contest called Sri Aurobindo National History Contest for children of 6th grade to 9th grade. And we'll publish their books, their essays in a anthology. It'll be nice for a 6th standard student to see their essay being published, on some matter of history which we've given to them. And the fourth wing is where the archive of Indian music has merged itself. We are trying to institute digital humanities, where how can technology be used for preservation of heritage and history. World over, you have the artificial intelligence models which are used for digitization, translation. So Ola luckily has a AI tool of Kritrim. So can we use that to see if some of our manuscripts could be digitized, some of our works could be translated fast into Indian languages, because as far as I know, Kritrim can manage to translate stuff in 8 Indian languages already, Hindi, Kannada, Tamil, Telugu, Marathi, Bengali, Gujarati and so on. So all these plans are also afoot, saying how can we bring technology to the aid of protecting, preserving our past and heritage. So it's a long, very, very ambitious task we've set out on, but I'm sure with a lot of support, well-wishers, and I'm in a city like Bangalore, which is blessed to have the, startup capital here. There's lots of young people who are passionate about this, Bhavesh being one of them, passionate about it and wants to do something about it. And so to get them all on board and not complain, not crib all the time, and actually do something.
Wow, man, you accelerate really fast. I remember, like I was saying, I just had you on my podcast to talk about Waiting for Shiva. That was in March.
Yeah.
You've got this book and you're doing this. So you've got your hands full.
Yes.
My only ask of you is, where can people follow this work, get engaged? Is there a website or a resource?
Yes. It's FIHCR.com. So they could actually write there. Many people...
and people will get grants to publish their own books if they want.
Yes.
Because one of the great things that happened to me as a kid is Scholastic had this book competition called For Kids, By Kids. So I entered the non-fiction category as a 9-year-old and I wrote an essay on Bhagat Singh. Of course, I was not a great writer. It was just adjectives. But I sort of penned down his life and what I felt about him. And that got published. I still have the book.
Wow.
To be published, to see my name in a tangible book. Till this day, I still think that this is an interim career, what I do. That someday I'm going to come back to memoir writing full time. Only because I was instilled with that confidence. When others around me were just trying, I was able to get published. So you're going to enable, especially in an age where people are not valuing writing as much, you're going to enable people to come back and really pursue these scholarly disciplines without feeling like, oh, I should do something that's, more fast or emerging, and, let this be a discipline that only people who are, older pursue.
Yeah.
So the website is called
FIHCR.com.
Wonderful. Man, thank you for your time. And I really hope that 30 years from now, 40 years from now, this book becomes a staple, at least in NCRT or other, other places in universities in India and abroad where history is taught. Because passing through the book, talking to you and seeing the reviews, I can tell you it's really a Shakespearean tale, but it's also at the same time a story that should go outside the South, and India should know about it. And of course, I commend you for being one of the best historians of our country. And
Thank you.
It's great to be a friend.
Thank you, Vinamre. Wonderful always talking to you, and thanks
Likewise.
always for giving this unhurried space to speak in detail about everything.
Thank you. It's my
Thank you.
pleasure.